Welcome to 28storms.com. This is a special midnight update on this Saturday, September 3rd, on developing Tropical Storm Lee and the growing flood potential across southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and southern Alabama. As of the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, maximum sustained winds are still 45 miles per hour. The forward motion has increased to 5 miles per hour, and it's moving overall in a northerly direction. But despite the slight increase in the forward speed, notice the 7 p.m. Monday forecast position. It's only expected to be in southeast Mississippi, so it's going to be raining over much of southeast Louisiana, lower Mississippi, and Alabama for the better part of the next 3 to 4 days here, and therefore the flooding potential is going to be immense. The latest spaghetti model plots are in very close agreement with the official forecast track. They take it just west of New Orleans, and the model consensus is a little bit to the west and then eventually to the north of the city, but passing very close, and then a gradual turn into Mississippi and central Alabama is anticipated. However, interest in this region must take note of the fact that it is very common for these tropical storms to contain much of their strongest winds and rainfall just to the east of the center. So this could easily turn out to be the primary threat for flooding here. We're talking about lower Plaquemines, eastern St. Bernard, eastern Orleans, St. Tammany Parish, into Hancock, Harrison, Jackson, and other surrounding counties of southern Mississippi, and eventually spreading into southwest Alabama. The latest NAM precipitation forecast for the next 84 hours is more than likely overdone, but if you take this model solution verbatim, you will see that the model is forecasting in excess of 20 to 25 inches of rainfall, and note where it's now centered. It's now centered a little bit closer to Pascagoula and Goshen, Mississippi, whereas just about 6 to 12 hours ago, it was showing maximum rainfall totals occurring over southeast Louisiana. Now, that doesn't mean southeast Louisiana isn't going to be the bullseye. In fact, we still think that there is a very high threat of some severe flooding, or at least street flooding, for much of the New Orleans metropolitan area, and so interest in that region must be taking all precautions, or all the possible precautions that you could possibly take for such an event like this. You may want to start moving the car to the neutral ground, which is common practice in New Orleans, and even sandbag if you can do that in an efficient manner. Also notice how the latest 5-day precipitation forecast from the HPC not only includes much of southeast Louisiana receiving in excess of about 20 to 23 inches of rainfall, but now notice how this bullseye is beginning to expand a little bit more into southern Mississippi and southwest Alabama. And that has been one of the key topics that we have been keying in on here at 28storms.com for the better part of the last 2 days. This flood threat is not confined just to New Orleans. This entire region needs to be on the lookout for street flooding, river flooding, and especially if you live in those low-lying areas, you need to really consider what you're going to be doing over the next few days, as there is a fairly good chance that the water levels will be rising in your immediate location. Also, for some of the streets immediately near the Mississippi Sound, I know that there are some portions that oftentimes go underwater. Here, especially along Highway 90, around Pass Christian, Waveland, and Bay St. Louis, there's a fairly good chance that that will happen again. I think a very good analog for this would be Tropical Storm Isidore. It came into southeast Louisiana, but despite being only a tropical storm, we still had some coastal surge flooding here across lower Mississippi, and the same can be said for much of Plaquemines Parish and St. Bernard. Also, one thing I really forgot to mention when talking about the latest official forecast track, the Hurricane Center has extended those tropical storm warnings toward the east, and they now encompass much, or I should say all of the Alabama coast, and we even have tropical storm watches up for Pensacola, Florida. And this is a very legit possibility that we could see some sustained tropical storm force winds along the immediate coast, especially if this storm begins to veer a little bit more toward the right a little earlier than forecast. And even if it stays on this track, we could still have some tropical storm force winds, as once again some of the heaviest convection very well could be just to the east of the low-level circulation. A quick look at the latest radar animation out of Slidell, Louisiana already shows that we have some stronger bands now beginning to approach the Louisiana coast. In fact, they're already beginning to pass through Terrebonne, Lafourche, and Lower Jefferson parishes. And with this is when the real flood threat is beginning. If we look at some of the latest storm rain totals, we see that in some of the darker red colors we're already approaching or I should say approaching rainfall totals in excess of about 5 to 6 inches. And you may also notice that little purple polygon that shows up over Terrebonne Parish. That was a tornado warning that was issued a couple hours ago, and that's going to be yet another threat that we will be looking at as Tropical Storm Lee begins to impact the central Gulf Coast states. Every so often, as we get one of these spiral bands, especially these outer bands streaming into the coastline, they can generate some small, brief, and isolated tornadoes. If we take a look on a more regional scale at the latest visible and overnight infrared imagery, we can see that the low-level center is still displaced to the western side of all of the strongest convection, and you can see this even better as we switch over to the enhanced infrared. And in fact, it looks like the storm may be trying to strengthen just a little bit more. We're beginning to see a little bit colder cloud tops develop to the south of Grand Isle, Louisiana, but overall this is still a very lopsided system. And this could be some good news for areas like Lafayette and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Some of the higher rainfall totals could stay just off toward your east, but I don't want to completely write off the threat for you guys there just yet. We still would like to see this occur for another good 12 to 24 hours before we can be overly definite about that. And if we go ahead and take a look at the latest water vapor imagery, we can still see why this storm is so lopsided. It's still basically halfway subtropical in nature. There is a mid to upper level disturbance located just to the west of the low level surface circulation, and that is the main culprit behind this storm really not getting its act together. We still have a lot of dry air and westerly wind shear coming in from Texas, and that's blowing all of the strongest cloud tops and convection off toward the northeast. And that is the overall thinking tonight as the center continues to move more toward the north or northeast. All this convection is still going to be displaced over here, more so over Mississippi and southern Alabama and the extreme coastal parishes of southeast Louisiana. And there is even the chance that the center would like to follow this convection a little bit more. So once again, do not be surprised if this forecast track were to shift a little bit more toward the east. On the flip side of that, if the storm still tracks directly into southeast Louisiana but remains relatively close to the coast, do not expect the low-level circulation and precipitation to dissipate in a very quick manner, because once again this is subtropical in nature, and while this will inhibit it from ever becoming a hurricane, this will also aid its consistent, or persistence I should say, as it begins to move over land. And not only that, but we have nothing but marshland, to be perfectly honest with you, to the south of Lake Pontchartrain. So it's really not moving away from its source of energy, being the Gulf of Mexico, as it continues to parallel or move into extreme southeast Louisiana. So much of the central Gulf Coast will be moving into a very rough stretch of weather over the next 72 hours. Interest there should prepare as best as they can. And for people that are fully aware that they live in a low-lying area that is flood-prone and is forecast to get in excess of 15 to 20 inches of rainfall, I advise you to check and see if there happens to be a shelter open, just in case, as of course that would be the safest place to be, and of course you would at least be dry at a safe location for the night, and we'll just have to monitor things as we move on from there. So thanks again for visiting 28storms.com. Don't forget to check out hurricanes.gov for the latest official information from the National Hurricane Center. And in the meantime, you can always check out our latest updates at 28storms.com, our Facebook page, the YouTube channel, and of course the Hurricane Tracker app if you're on the go or without power and have to check on things using your cell phone. So thanks again, and stay safe out there along the central Gulf Coast.